Ladies and gentlemen, they can't deny it anymore. For years, Democrats and their media mouthpieces have been telling us that their rhetoric is just words, it's just politics. But now those words are carved into bullets, engraved with anti-ICE messages, fired into an ICE facility, innocent detainees dead. Now, here's the kicker. While families mourn and law enforcement's under fire, what does CNN do? Well, they go on air and they say the etchings on the bullets might not even mean anything, might even be a joke. Are you kidding me? Like, are they just intentionally trying to gaslight us? Meanwhile, former ICE director Tom Homan just dropped a bombshell on national television. He says the hate campaign against ICE, fueled by Democrats and their allies, is exactly what pushed this shooter to act. And the left, instead of owning up, they double down. Gavin Newsom himself calls Trump's team fascist, while his own words are fueling the exact chaos that we're watching unfold across the country. Folks, this ain't politics anymore. This is deadly. This is proof. And today I'm going to show you exactly how this rhetoric of the left is no longer just talk. It's strategy. In fact, it's a strategy that now has left blood on their hands. Now, stick with me, guys, because what I'm about to share with you, I'm going to break down exactly what you're going to see here. This is going to be the moment in America's history that will force everyone to look at this with new eyes. Hit the like button, subscribe, guys. Here we are. The air in this country is rather thick, and not just with politics as usual. No, this one's different. This is darker. We've literally officially reached the breaking point where rhetoric isn't just rhetoric anymore. It's not just angry words tossed around on cable news. In fact, those words have now crossed into action. I'm talking about violent action, deadly action. And I got to remind you, President Donald J. Trump, long before he returned to the White House, he warned us about this. He pointed this out. He told us that if you left it unchecked, the hate-filled rhetoric, if you just let it spread and let it fester, it eventually takes on a life of its own. And he said, if you let them keep demonizing ICE, keep demonizing police, keep demonizing conservatives, eventually somebody's going to pick up a weapon and act on it. Now, folks, that day isn't just someday anymore. It's now. And this is not a hypothetical debate about free speech or about some heated arguments on Twitter. None of that. This is the real world consequence of Democrats and their allies in the media treating politics and political opponents like monsters. So when you call ICE Gestapo, when you call Trump's team fascists, when you compare ordinary law enforcement officers to these slave control or slave patrol, what do you think is going to happen? Do you really think that those words just vanish into thin air? No, they take root, they radicalize, they embolden, and now they've spilled over into a Texas facility where people are dead. Now, this is the breaking point. We're no longer talking about possibilities. We're actually looking at the aftermath. And what makes this so chilling is that it was predictable, it was preventable, but the left didn't care to prevent it. Why? Because their rhetoric isn't an accident. It's not some mistake that they made in the heat of the moment. It is literally a strategy. And the ICE shooting that we're about to talk about, this proves that their strategy has turned deadly. So now let's talk about what happened, okay? Because this is where the spin falls apart. In Texas, at an ICE facility, shots were fired. A sniper aimed into the building. No ICE agents were hit, thankfully, but 3 detainees were struck. 2 of them died, and innocent lives were gone. And so what was left behind at the scene? Shell casings, not just ordinary shell casings, casings with a message literally etched into the metal. Anti-ICE, carved, engraved, undeniable. Think about that. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't some lone wolf with no political motive. This was a deliberate act meant to send a message. The shooter wanted the world to know exactly why he was pulling the trigger. Despite whatever the media wants to tell you, the message is rather clear. It's right there, guys. It's stamped onto the bullets themselves. Now, here's another layer here. Reports are actually suggesting that the shooter wasn't well trained. He likely intended to hit the ICE officers directly, but his lack of skill meant that the detainees ended up in the line of fire instead. And so that's the tragic irony of this whole event here. The shooter's hate for ICE was so consuming, he didn't even care who got hurt. He was just blinded by rage that basically had been fed to him from basically day after day by Democrats and the media allies who spent years painting ICE as villains. And this isn't speculation. This is not conspiracy. This is not theory. What we're talking about here, the evidence is physical. This is hard metal. It's bullets with anti-ICE literally scratched onto them. So how do you spin that anyway, right? How do you deny that? You can't. This is exactly why this story matters, because it shows us that something is undeniable here. Rhetoric has become weaponized. Words didn't just lead to violence here. Words were carried into an ICE facility on the side of a bullet. And if that doesn't prove how dangerous the left strategy has become, then guys, I don't know what does. Now, the right Medicare plan balances three things: cost, doctors, and benefits, okay? But most people are stuck sacrificing at least one of those. This is why I partnered with Chapter. They help people find Medicare coverage where you don't have to sacrifice and you can actually have all three. Now, one of our viewers, she said, Chapter showed me a Medicare plan that saved money and kept my doctors. So let me ask, are you going to keep sacrificing, or are you going to do what most people already are and balancing it all? Well, most people, they're calling the phone number right there at the bottom of your screen, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron. Phone number's on your screen, 909-563-8279, and tell my friends over at Chapter that Ron says hello. So let's look at how the media reacted to all this, okay? Because if you thought that they would just take a step back, admit the truth, my bad, acknowledge that their rhetoric has consequences, think again. CNN wasted no time jumping into muddy waters here. One analyst literally went on air and said, well, just because the bullets had anti-ICE etched into them, that doesn't necessarily prove motive. Excuse me? What? Like, are we living in clown world? Is everybody in there wearing some clown shoes? Like, when a shooter goes out of his way to engrave his ideology onto live rounds of ammunition, how much more obvious can it be? I mean, and it gets worse. I swear they're gaslighting y'all on purpose, right? Another commentator suggested that maybe, just maybe, get this, maybe the shooter wrote anti-ICE as some sort of a joke. A joke? Like, tell that joke to the families of the two detainees who are now no longer with us. Tell that to the ICE agents who know that they were the real targets. Who in their right mind would actually call murder weapons, like, with political slogans on them, a joke? Like, that's like, you got to be a sociopath to think something like that. Folks, this is gaslighting on steroids. This is the media looking at you in the eye and saying, don't believe what you see. Don't believe what's literally engraved in cold, hard steel. Believe us instead. That's basically what they're telling you. Like, we'll tell you it doesn't mean anything. We'll tell you it's just a coincidence. Now, here's the real kicker. They always find a way to twist it back on conservatives every single time without exception. Doesn't matter if the evidence is undeniable. It doesn't matter if the shooter leaves a manifesto. It doesn't matter if anti-ICE is scratched onto the bullet itself. Guys, CNN and their buddies at MSNBC, they will always spin it into to blame conservatives or erase the left's fingerprints entirely. So now let me ask you this. How do you think that the audience feels when they hear CNN talk like this? They feel insulted. They feel mocked, made fun of, like they're stupid. Like, they feel like these elites are so elitist and they're looking down at us like we're just completely stupid. And this is exactly why trust in mainstream media is in free fall. I mean, and they're not just wrong. They're deliberately insulting your intelligence to protect their political allies. And they're doing it while lives are being lost at the same time. That's really what makes it so disgusting here. And so now, while CNN is busy spinning, somebody else stepped up and told the truth. Tom Homan, former director of ICE. This is a man who's been on the front lines, who has looked these threats in the eye, dropped a bombshell on national television. He actually said flat out that this shooter's actions were based on hate, and that hate didn't come from nowhere. It came straight from the rhetoric being pumped out by Democrats and their allies in the press. Now, Homan connected the dots in a way that nobody else in the mainstream media wanted to. He said the shooter didn't just wake up one morning and decide ICE officers were the enemy. He was conditioned by years of politicians calling ICE slave patrols, conditioned by Democrats comparing law enforcement to the Gestapo or the SS, conditioned by activists screaming that ICE is terrorizing families and kidnapping children. When you dehumanize officers like that, when you strip them of legitimacy, when you paint them as monsters, you are handing a loaded weapon to the most unstable members of your base. And this time, one of them pulled the trigger. And the weight of this, this coming from Tom Homan can't be overstated. It really can't. This isn't some talking head. This isn't some partisan pundit. This is a man who served his country, who led ICE, who knows exactly how dangerous this environment has become. So when he says that Democrat rhetoric spurred this shooter into action, he's not exaggerating at all. He's diagnosing the disease right in front of us. So now I want you to ask yourself, how did Democrats respond to Tom Homan's warning? Did they reflect? Did they tone it down a little bit? No, they doubled down. As they always do, they denied, they deflected, and then they carried on with the same poisonous language that got us here in the first place. So now, if this ICE facility shooting was just one isolated case, okay, maybe you could kind of argue maybe it was a freak event, right? But it's not even close. This is part of a very disturbing pattern that's been building for years, and the left does not want you to see the big picture. They don't. So let's go ahead and lay this out, shall we? So first, we've had not one, but two failed assassination attempts on President Trump, right? Donald J. Trump, the leader of this country, a man elected by the American people, targeted for death by radicals who absorbed years of nonstop propaganda about how Trump is a threat to democracy, a dictator, a danger to the planet, danger to cartoons, and anything else you hold dear. You see what I'm saying, guys? You keep feeding these unstable people that line, and guess what? They try to take matters into their own hands. Then, of course, there's the attack on ABC's building. Shots fired, trying to intimidate the media when it suits them. Notice when conservatives criticize the media, they're accused of putting journalists in danger. When someone on the left actually fires shots, the story disappears from the headlines faster than you can blink. And who can forget the attempted explosion at Fox News? I mean, think about the symbolism here, guys. Fox has been the one major platform willing to challenge Democrat narratives head on. And then what happens? They get targeted. You don't need a PhD in political science to understand what's happening here. This is clearly forms of intimidation. It's terrorism, and it's happening in one direction: against conservatives, against Trump supporters, against institutions that won't toe the Democratic line. So no, this ICE shooting's not a fluke. It's not shocking, really. It's really the next entry in a long list of violent acts carried out in the atmosphere that Democrats created themselves. So this is why this matters so much. It's showing you the direction we're headed in. If they're willing to keep ratcheting up the language, if they're willing to just keep painting half of America as monsters, then you can bet that there will be more bullets, more bombs, and more blood. And so while all of this is happening, while bullets with political slogans are flying around, while conservatives are being targeted, Gavin Newsom decides it's the perfect time to pour gasoline on the fire. So what does Gavin Newsom do? Well, he goes out and calls Stephen Miller, one of Trump's most trusted advisors, a fascist. Now, we got to stop right there for a second, right? That word fascist isn't just an insult. It's not just a slap in the face. It's one of the most loaded, dangerous labels in politics. So when you call somebody a fascist, you're not just saying, I disagree with them. You're saying this person is evil. This person is Hitler. This person doesn't deserve to exist in a free society. And so when you plant that idea in the minds of your followers, don't be surprised when someone will decide that violence is justified. Now, this is how it works. First, you dehumanize, then you delegitimize, then you justify, and then finally you act. That's the pipeline. That's the pattern. And Gavin Newsom knows that. He's not stupid. He might act stupid, but he's not stupid. He knows exactly the kind of poison that he's pumping into the conversation when he throws around the word fascist like it's candy. And so now compare that to President Trump. What has Trump been saying since returning to office? Law and order, accountability, respect for those who serve. Yes, he calls out corruption. Yes, he mocks the media, but he's not out here painting half of America as literal Nazis. He's not giving his followers permission to treat political opponents like subhumans. That is the difference. One side wants stability. The other side wants complete and utter chaos. And the fact that Gavin Newsom doubled down right in the middle of his firestorm kind of shows you exactly where his priorities are. He doesn't care about the lives that were lost at that ICE facility. Gavin Newsom doesn't care about de-escalating the tension. Gavin Newsom only concerns himself with stoking hatred, keeping his base enraged and pissed off, and then hoping nobody notices that people are actually getting wiped off the planet because of this rhetoric. So I want to go ahead and ask you guys, when bullets with anti-ICE engravings on them are lying in the dirt, when a former ICE director is warning this is based on hate, when our own president is being targeted twice in assassination attempts, what kind of leader looks at all of this and decides that the right move is to just scream fascist at his opponents? Think about that, right? A reckless one, a dangerous one, and one who cannot escape the truth that his words, his party's words, they're fueling the fire that's already burning across America. So here's where it gets even more infuriating, folks, because when the bullets were still warm on the ground in Texas, the spin machine fired up immediately. MSNBC, CNN, and the usual cast of characters, they started doing what they always do, twisting reality. So instead of admitting the obvious, that a shooter engraved anti-ICE on his bullets and targeted a federal facility, they started questioning whether the shooter's motives were even left-wing at all. Can you even believe that? A bullet casing literally screams the motive in plain text, but somehow the media still manages to shrug and say, well, I don't think we know for sure. It's crazy. I know. Now, one anchor even said, it's strange to see this coming from the left. It could have been someone mocking or even joking. A joke? Murder is now a joke? Engraving a political slogan into live ammunition is something to laugh about? That's not journalism. That is denial dressed up as analysis. And this is the trick, folks. They know most people won't dig deeper. They know if they sow a little doubt, if they throw out enough maybes and what ifs, they can blur the truth until it's unrecognizable. That way, instead of the story being left-wing shooter kills detainees and anti-ICE rampage, the story becomes more like, well, nobody really knows what happens. Maybe the right is exaggerating again. That's not just dishonesty. That is narrative manipulation at the highest level. Because here's a really uncomfortable truth for them. If they admit that Democrat rhetoric inspired the shooter, then they also have to admit that blood is now on their hands. And they're never going to do that. So then they flip the script. They gaslight, they cover it up. And I'll go ahead and say it again. This isn't about protecting the public or even protecting the shooter's identity. This is about protecting their movement. Because if people connect the dots, if Americans start to realize that resistance rhetoric is translating into real world violence, then the whole Democrat machine begins to collapse. This is why the media is working overtime to blur this story or spin it beyond recognition. And so while the media is busy covering up stuff, Gavin Newsom is back in California writing the next chapter of his double standard playbook. So what's his latest move? Well, Gavin Newsom is pushing this new law to ban federal agents from wearing masks during operations. You heard that right, guys. Gavin Newsom wants ICE officers, federal law enforcement, the very people being targeted by radicals, to have their identities exposed. Why? So that they can be harassed, so that their families can be threatened, so activists can follow them home and then put them on blast. That's their end game. Strip away their anonymity, make them targets, and weaken federal enforcement. But here's the part that should really make your blood boil. Newsom conveniently carves out an exemption for his law enforcement units that he controls. You see, Gavin Newsom's guys, they can wear masks. Gavin's forces can stay protected. But federal agents? Nah, they're fair game. You see the trick, guys? It's not about principle. It's not about transparency. It's purely about power. It's about control. Newsom wants to weaken the people he doesn't control, and he wants to empower the ones that he does. And he wraps this thing all up in some phony concern about accountability. I actually remembered my air quotes that one. So here's the kicker, guys. Democrats scream bloody murder when ICE wears masks, but then they go and cheer when Antifa does it. I mean, like, it's unbelievable. They call masked agents Gestapo, but the masked mobs throwing Molotov cocktails are protesters. I know. The double standard just really couldn't be any more clear. So now, why does this matter in the bigger picture? Well, it matters because when Democrats demonize law enforcement and they strip away protections and they call officers fascists, they're creating exactly the conditions that encourage radicals to act out violently. And the Texas shooting proves this. This isn't some abstract debate anymore. Their words are directly connected to blood on the ground. So let me ask you this. If Newsom really cared about safety, if he really wanted to dial down the temperature, then why would he strip protections from ICE officers in a moment when they're already being hunted? I think the simple answer is it's not about safety. It's really about consolidating power, punishing opponents, and giving his base what it craves, another excuse to hate. Now, I want to talk about derangement for a second because the left loves to throw that around, don't they? Right? They all say conservatives are deranged for being angry about California's decline. They're going to mock us for being fed up with Newsom's policies, calling it California derangement syndrome. But let me tell you something. There is no such thing. I mean, nobody is deranged for being angry that California streets are overrun with crime and homelessness. Nobody is deranged for being furious that families can't afford to live there. Like, do you have $1 million to buy a shack? Like a 2-bedroom shack with a rusty roof? I mean, it's ridiculously expensive there. Businesses are fleeing. The wildfires go unmanaged until the whole state gets consumed and burning up in entire communities. That's not derangement. That is justified anger at failed leadership. So now let's kind of compare that with what's actually deranged. Trump derangement syndrome. Now, this sickness has rotted the minds of liberals to the point where they will literally harm themselves just to own Trump. Case in point, you guys remember the whole Tylenol fiasco, right? Well, President Trump, he referenced real research from Harvard and Johns Hopkins University about potential risks of Tylenol during presidency. He didn't make it up. He didn't pull it out of thin air. He cited studies. Tylenol itself even admitted years ago that they had not conducted long-term tests on pregnant women. But because Trump said it, the mainstream media rushed to declare his comments unproven, dangerous, or even misinformation. So then what happened next? Well, what happened next is pregnant liberal women on TikTok started filming themselves swallowing Tylenol on camera just to spite him. Now, think about how crazy and insane that is. You're going to risk your own health, the health of your unborn child, just because you hate a man who told you to be cautious, to be careful. That, my friends, right there, that's derangement. That's a great example of that. Okay. It's not being angry about failed politics. It's not about being outraged by hypocrisy. True derangement is when hatred blinds you so badly that you would rather risk your own life, risk your own family, than admit Trump might have a point. So if they're going to do that over a bottle of Tylenol, is it any surprise that some radicalized follower would pick up a rifle, scratch anti-ice into the bullets, and open fire? Yeah, it's the same disease, just a different symptom. A hatred that's just so consuming, so irrational that it leads straight to destruction. And so this is really where the mask comes all the way off. Because the left's rhetoric, this endless stream of fascist, Gestapo, slave patrol, Trump is Hitler nonsense, it's not sloppy. It's not careless. It's not, oops, we went too far. No, it's intentional. It's strategy. They know exactly what they're doing. They know that by cranking up the language, they can whip their base into a frenzy. They can make ordinary citizens feel like there's some, like they're a part of some grand crusade. They can convince unstable minds that violence isn't just acceptable, it's necessary. This is why this ICE shooting matters so much, because it proves the point in the starkest way possible. We've now reached a place where Democrat talking points aren't just being shouted on MSNBC panels. They're being carved into the ammunition. Words are no longer just words. They're bullets. They're bombs. There's blood on the floor. And so think about how dangerous this is for our future. If rhetoric is strategy and violence is the result, then where does that road lead? More shootings, more chaos, more division. That's the plan, because the chaos is the environment in which the authoritarians live and where they thrive. So while Trump pushes for stability, for law and order, for accountability, Democrats push for perpetual crisis. Crisis keeps their base angry. Crisis keeps their donors happy. Crisis keeps their power alive. And if innocent people die in the process, well, oh well. If ICE officers are hunted, well. If detainees lose their lives, to them, it's just collateral damage in the bigger war for control. That's the ugly truth that they're never going to admit. But the evidence is right in front of us. So here we are, guys, and we've reached the dividing line. On the one side, you got President Trump standing for law and order, calling for accountability, demanding that violence be condemned no matter where it comes from. But on the other side, you got Democrats and their media allies pumping out rhetoric that fuels hate, then pretending that they have nothing to do with the carnage that follows. You got the ICE shootings. This is more than just a headline. It is a wake-up call. It is a warning shot literally about where this country is headed if we don't demand accountability now. Because make no mistake, if this isn't confronted, it's only going to get worse. And the next target might not be a detainee in Texas. The next target could be an ICE officer, a police officer, a political leader, or even a neighbor who just happens to be wearing the wrong hat. So the question is, how much longer will America allow this to go on? How many more excuses will we tolerate from CNN and MSNBC? How many more slurs will we stomach from Gavin Newsom before we admit what's really happening? Words are becoming weaponized. Rhetoric has become strategy, and strategy has become deadly. They can't deny it anymore. The evidence is carved into the bullets themselves. It's lying in the dirt, stained with blood, staring this nation in the face. And really the only question left, the question you need to ask yourself right now is this: will America wake up before it's too late?